One may object by saying that people don't choose their beliefs. That people don't choose their beliefs. That there's no on and off switch for believing what we do. We do not control our beliefs in the same way we control our limbs. I can choose in an instant to raise my arm up, but I can't do the same with my beliefs. I can't just choose to believe something. So isn't it unfair for God to punish someone with hell for something he cannot control? Okay, several comments are in order here. We need to differentiate between having direct control over our beliefs and indirect control over our beliefs. Direct control over our beliefs would be something like believing at the snap of my finger that the sky is in fact green, not blue. Yet, most of us would agree that we, generally speaking, do not have that kind of control over our beliefs. You can't just believe something like that at will. Nevertheless, there are cases or examples that could be furnished demonstrating that we could have direct control over our beliefs. You know how sometimes we say things like, I want to believe this is true. Or today I'm choosing to believe in myself, in my capabilities. Or a friend tells you, I know this doesn't make sense, but I really need you to believe me right now. And you say, okay, I'll believe you. And so on, right? So we kind of have this idea of choosing to believe things. Some examples to consider here would involve when you have a stake in the truth of something. Take for example somebody who's trapped in a well in the middle of nowhere. He chooses to believe. He chooses to believe because he wants to believe that he'll be rescued. He's not basing this on any evidence. Rather, he wants to believe he'll be rescued because if he doesn't, that alternative outcome would be too grim for him to handle and would only demoralize him. So in order to not feel panicked and depressed, and in order to feel optimistic, he chooses to believe that he'll be rescued. At other times, we may knowingly suppress information and believe to the contrary of what that information is conveying. Some people are willingly in denial about certain things. They intentionally refuse to allow themselves to believe something. Imagine a mother who has a child who she knows deep down inside is using drugs when she's outside the house. She knows that if she chooses to believe that he's doing drugs, then her relationship with him would crumble. But out of love and for the sake of having a healthy relationship with her son, she chooses to suppress that information and willingly believe that her son isn't doing drugs, just in order to maintain that healthy relationship with her son. This is psychologically possible. We can also imagine choosing to believe things out of pragmatism or convenience. For example, an employee working at a company could see that the work environment is really horrible, but in order to cope better and motivate himself to pull through going to work each day, he manages to convince himself and believe that his workplace environment isn't actually that bad. we could also imagine someone choosing to believe in something in order to ease his conscience. Imagine somebody did something really bad, and he's feeling very guilty about it. The guilt is just eating him up alive. Well, in order to make himself feel better, he begins to convince himself that what he actually did wasn't so bad after all. And he does this by trying to modify his previous moral stance on that matter. More examples can be offered, but I hope the gist of what I'm trying to get at is clear. To say that we do not have direct control over our beliefs is not clearly unconditionally true. At least several human experiences do seem to lay testament to that. Sometimes we consciously choose to believe things in people not because the evidence was so powerful enough to compel us to believe, kind of like how we are compelled to believe that 1 + 1 = 2, as there's no escaping having that knowledge, but rather choose to believe out of love, or out of maintaining relationships, or out of optimism, or out of mercy, or out of psychological need, or out of our mental and spiritual well-being, out of saving our marital relationships, etc. Whoever makes that blanket, unconditional claim that we do not have direct control over our beliefs at all would need to provide some evidence for that. Secondly, even if we grant that we do not have direct control over our beliefs, we most certainly do have indirect control over our beliefs. This is hardly disputed, and virtually every philosopher would agree with this. So, for example, I could choose to research and better investigate a topic, or I could choose to neglect doing so. And it's pretty obvious that researching and knowing more about a given topic could play an influential role in shaping my views and opinions about that given subject. Another way we have indirect control over our beliefs is that we can choose to put ourselves in situations and circumstances that demotivate and hinder our ability to change our beliefs. Perhaps living in a particular environment, or working in a particular job, or befriending or marrying particular people would make it increasingly difficult for us to change our beliefs. Yet many are willingly putting themselves in those situations, or at the very least willingly remaining in such circumstances. Some who object to the notion of hell argue that it's easier said than done for people to change their circumstances, that it's not always psychologically or physically easy to make decisions requiring significant transformational changes. Now, there's no denying there could be cases like that. However, we have to be careful about being too lax on people by affording them excuses that they do not deserve. It's easy to say that one isn't responsible for what he has no control over, but what if that lack of control only came about as a consequence of irresponsible, voluntary past decisions that were made? Let's say a father has no money and isn't able to feed his family. Some may say, come on, he isn't able to feed his family, and you can't criticize him. It's not like he has the ability to do so, but refuses. But then we say, okay, hold on. Why is the father in that situation? Is it because he lost his job due to an economic crisis that was beyond his control? and there was no one to help him? Or was it because he recklessly gambled all his money down the drain and is left broke as a result of that, with his family bearing the consequences as well? There's a big difference, right? Or let's say you have a heavily drunk person who cannot control himself while he's driving really fast. And you shout at him to stop on the side of the road, but he's unable to. And he recklessly swerves, hits the pavement, and injures everybody in the car. Now, technically, he could say in his defense that he had no control at the time you shouted at him to stop. That he didn't willingly injure everybody in the car. However, we all know that he is still to blame because he did have the ability and control to avoid knowingly getting heavily drunk with the intention to drive later. Similarly, I mean, let's say you have somebody who works for a criminal organization, right? And as a member of this criminal organization, he has no choice but to torture innocent people. He really has no choice. However, he did willingly join that criminal organization, and he does willingly remain in it. But as long as he's part of it, he's forced to torture innocent people. Can we not blame him for willingly putting himself in a situation where he's coerced to torture people? Absolutely, of course we can. Same thing when it comes to our character. I mean, let's say somebody has really serious anger issues. Do we excuse him because he cannot control his anger? Well, how about when he's calm and collected and he's fully aware that he has serious anger issues? Did he not have the ability to take anger management classes, or at the very least research on Google tips on how to self-contain one's anger? Sure, he did, but he chose not to. He chose to be okay with having serious anger issues, even at the expense of continuing to emotionally or possibly even physically harming people as a result of his extreme anger. We have to understand that we indirectly have control and influence over our psychological and spiritual conditions over the course of time. You know, just as you can take courses to harness your logic, to better avoid committing logical fallacies, and just as you can influence your weight through dieting and exercising, and just as you could take training courses to develop soft skills like negotiating and management, you can also influence the formation and development of your character and spiritual state over time. You know, each time you resist to sin, you strengthen and train your will to resist for the future as well. The more you resist to sin, the easier it becomes to resist again and again. Many of us can choose our friends, can choose our circumstances, can choose several factors that influence our decisions somewhere down the line. You know, the more you squander away opportunities to do good and opt for chances to do bad, the more accustomed you would become to engaging in this. You know, it could reach the point where there's no turning back even. You may even reach a point where you freely commit evil actions till you reach a threshold where there's no coming out of it. And that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevents guidance for some people and seals their hearts. Kind of similar to a drug addict who keeps taking drugs till he reaches a point of uncontrollable addiction. Yet it was free will that gradually led that person into that state of lack of control. It's no different. Trying to relate this all to the topic now, right? It's no different with beliefs and searching for religious truth. There may be people who intentionally make themselves ignorant of things, they are morally obligated to know in the name of some ignorance is bliss attitude or heedlessness or whatever reason. So it's not a simple matter of saying, well, we can't blame that person for being a kafir because he was ignorant. But why was he ignorant? Why was he ignorant? Is his ignorance a result of previous immoral and reckless decision making which led to it or not? It's important that this is addressed, as ignorance isn't always morally blameless, as we've already clearly shown. Let's say a racist juror believed that the black defendant was guilty even before the trial began. He couldn't help but believe it. He's a racist who's been indoctrinated to have such prejudicial beliefs about black people. You can't just tell him at that point in time to just stop believing in such a prejudicial fashion, and in an instant, he just stops. It's beyond his control. And we can't judge a person for things beyond their control, right? Wrong. As that person had a lifetime of opportunity to critically question those racist beliefs of his, and before he was chosen to be part of the jury for that trial. Similarly, when people are not able to change their beliefs at a given point in time, we must ask why, and ask whether reckless decision making and carelessness and indifference to the truth led to that lack of control or not. It's important to understand that moments of decision making are not single precise moments. There is a whole lifetime of decision making that influences and shapes our characters and beliefs. Every moral and spiritual decision that we've ever made over the passage of time plays a role in constituting who we are today. Now, with all that said, with all that said, we can better understand why it could be under people's control to choose kufri beliefs about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does command the disbelievers, He does command the disbelievers to believe in Him and His messenger. فَآمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ. Someone might read this ayah and say, how can someone be commanded to just believe? Well, as we just saw, it's very reasonable to understand how. In fact, one could control what he or she believes.